Okay.
Yeah, Lori's not on right now, but
Okay. Well, this is Jolene. If you don't know, I'm your demo chair. And today's Zoom artist is Thiermann. And I took a class many years ago, I won't admit to how long, with Anne, and I always remembered her. She taught me lots of wonderful things about light. And when I saw her, when I took this position, I contacted her. And graciously, she is doing a demo today. She has been painting in the Central Coast and doing murals, over 70 murals for natural history museums. And we're going to post some of her list of where they are at if you are interested in seeing them. And she was going to talk about the movement and things that speak to her, because she is also does work as a professional organist and pianist. So she's very rhythmic, let's say. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Anne, and let you give us your information so that we can maybe glean some.
Okay, I'm delighted to see. I actually look at gallery view, how many people are here. We've got a nice group of people, and I know you're all interested in making your individual paintings more dynamic and more excited and more of an expression of what you really feel about an abstract world or a natural world. So I have been a naturalist, and I'm camped since I was a kid. I was always loved getting out in nature. That's how we spent our vacations growing up. And my father happened to be the largest tree surgeon in LA. So he was always talking about trees. We had 8 acres in the Santa Monica Mountains. So I've always loved climbing and drawing trees. And I thought today I would focus on what I've learned to help me draw trees a little better. So I will start with a demonstration in drawing on trees. Then I will move to showing you some finished pastels and acrylics that are both plein air studies and also studio studies and murals that are on location. And then if you have questions, I'll be delighted to field those. If we have time, I'll get back into doing a little color study, but most of it is going to be going over some fundamentals of drawing, because I think that if you really know how to draw the topic that you're painting, you can do a better job of it. Okay, so
And
yes.
just a minute. We have a chat thing, and a lot of our watchers will list things in chats, and I can then ask you the questions as you're in process, if that's okay with you.
No problem. Yeah.
Okay.
And let me get the just make sure the volume's all the way up, so I'm hearing you guys. If you're okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll turn it down just a tiny bit. That was too loud. Okay. So I'm just going to take a second and transfer over to my other screen. So it just takes me a minute here, and I will go to my other screen. Okay,
There we go.
so I'd like to start with something so very simple, and I'm just going to double check. You can see me. Okay, from the beginning of time, when we were kids, we thought a tree was a circle and a couple lines, right? Everybody could draw a tree by the time you were in, I don't know, 3rd grade or whatever. Well, we might say, oh, that's so stupid. But actually, today I'm going to talk about the canopy and the whole trunk and branching system. Okay, so if we took this symbol, this very simple symbol, I'm going to turn that up just so you can see it just a little better. There we go. And first of all, we said, okay, how about that trunk? Well, first off,
you know, the bottom, the trunk is actually,
A cylinder. So a mistake that a lot of painters do is they just,
get it straight at the bottom. But if you suggest roundness at the bottom of your cylinder,
you already you're on your way to making a tree more livable. Okay.
so thinking that this is a cylinder, it's going to have a round base, even if it looks flat, could have some roots coming out. Okay, then on the canopy, there are some trees where you can't see
Anything but the trunk, and then it goes into the canopy. But
let's assume that there is some sort of branching, okay? And then the canopy starts. Now, the idea that it's a ball
is not completely erroneous. A ball flat is simply a circle, but a ball 3D is a sphere.
So a sphere is, let's do another circle, and maybe we'll do a couple of circles, but they're going to be more like ellipses. And I'm going to go back and draw this a little bit bigger. Okay. And what we could do is, a circle is flat, but an ellipse that it becomes spherical
Has light and shade.
So I might take and put some shadow. I'm going to do this again. This is just kind of the first rough part, okay? And I might add a little bit of detail to that sphere. I might go a little bit darker under the branch. And so we're going from that basic concept that it's a circle, but actually the canopy is spherical. Okay, so it's kind of messy. So I'm going to start that over again, and we're going to talk about a few more things. So our initial 10-year-old view of a tree, the trunk and the canopy need to be starting to be
A little bit bigger and more three-dimensional.
okay. So let's start. You can see that here. Good. Let's start with that trunk. Okay. And I'm going to have, often asymmetry is good. Like maybe we have a big branch that goes off here and a smaller one goes here. Okay, let's start with the trunk.
Okay, we said it was a slide this down just a little bit. So we get there we go. Okay.
We suggested that it was going to be round at the base. And so I am going to suggest that we suggest roots. There's so many studies being done now about trees and how their interconnection through mycelium, that one tree can communicate with another tree under the ground. And so I think, although some trees look like you can barely see the roots, boy, if you have a chance to just suggest a little bit of root, you're talking about the intelligence of the tree. Okay,
Now, if we say that the tree
has a cylinder for a
trunk,
then let's pick a light side. Okay, I'm going to pick a light side over here. I'm going to put the light coming over in this direction. And I would have, my 10-year-old drawing, I might have put a light sun anyway. So that means that one side is going to be in shadow. And I think I'm going to shift to just a slightly different tone. And now I can just say, okay, one side's in shadow. Good enough. But if I want to really think about how a cylinder is shaped, something that I found really helpful is not to have just two values in a cylinder, but to have a core dark. Core dark is something that is within the shadow shape, it does not go all the way to the edge. And what it does, by making that section a little bit darker, it creates like a reflected light. So this is not light over here. It's the basic shading value. Then I came back into it and I added what's called a core dark. And I'm using a Conti. This is the type of material I would use in my pastels. And you could say, well, okay, is there anything else you do to the trunk? Well, the trunk it could be look like absolutely straight. And I've certainly seen trees that look just as straight as a board on either side. But if I have a chance to emphasize one side or another, what I will do is I might take a little bit of darkness on one side and I balance the darkness with another side. And so it's not two even lines, that there are organic lines that balance each other. And they're thick to thin. And what that is called contrapposto. It's against the post. And it's a term that came from figure drawing. So if I'm standing kind of on one leg and that shoulder is down on the side that the weight is on, let's say my left leg, then the right shoulder is up and the foot is lighter. So it's against the post. All right. So this is something I would use. Another thing I would do would be, I would consider, I'm going to go ahead and just put a cast shadow over here and from the tree, because we know our sun's over there. And the shadow shape can also reinforce the cylindrical quality of our tree. Okay. I might even come back in and even make to really let you folks see that core dark, put it even a little bit darker. Okay. Now you might say, but I'm out here looking in nature and I don't see that core dark. Occasionally you'll be able to see it really clearly, but my art is not just based on what I see. It's based on the studies that I did after my BA in art at UCSC. I studied with a Renaissance painter for a year in Topanga Canyon. Then I went to the Art Students League for 3 years and studied figure drawing. This is based on figure drawing. And then I went to Cal State Long Beach for graduate school in painting and drawing for another 4 years. So these ideas are ones that were brought to me, not at the first class, I wish they had been, but along the way from other experienced artists. So that's something that I like, is having the core dark. And again, there are artists who do beautiful work who don't have it, but I happen to like it. Okay, so now I want to show this particular tree that it has a branch that kind of goes around. All right. Well, if I draw the branch just kind of 2 lines curving around like this, I will get a really good hose to water the rest of the garden. You cannot draw branches that are curved by simply making a curve. Okay. And I'm going to show you, I want to put a point up here where I'm headed. I'm going to have a branch curving around that way. And let's see if I can get the sun out of here.
I learned this from you in that class a bazillion years ago, a faceted line.
Aha, great.
I remember.
Great. Nice. So how do you make a curve look like it could hold itself up? You know, a ballerina holding up her arm is not just a little curve. It's made of some joints that have strength in it. Okay. Sections of straight. And I'm just doing sections of straight, but I'm going to do a little bit more to that as we get. And we got to remember on a tree that its getting narrower because the water's being pumped up from the base, okay? All right, now that looks pretty boring. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my contrapposto idea. I'm going to have a little bit of strength here. Right where it turns, I'm going to pretend it's like a sock that's getting wrinkled. Where it bends and say maybe goes into another branch, often a tree will thicken just a little bit. If you've ever trimmed some of your trees and you notice, hey, it gets a little thicker right where it's coming down and breaking into two sections, okay?
Where it supports the secondary.
Right. So as you do your branch, now you say, okay, now I have to get this shadow shape and I have to put the core dark in. I don't do a core dark down into the smaller branches. I might have certainly the light's coming down. So this is going to be my shadow side, and this is all going to be in shadow. And then when I come to these smaller things, I'm just doing it as, simple. Because if we zoomed in and that was our focus, fine. But you're not going to be able to see those tiny details. All right. So I might go back and I might do just a little bit of core. And this is going to be a little stronger line than you'd probably want. But right when things turn, if you think about my, let's see, can you see that? I don't know. I'm trying to put it in. Yeah. Okay. You see where my elbow is. You see how all the lines are coming from this area and they're expanding outward. So I'm going to just take a couple of crease wrinkle lines right on that spot. And you don't want this to be, regular. You just, what I'm also suggesting is that a couple of curved lines suggest a cylinder. See, if I put a couple of curved lines in here, that becomes the texture of bark. That also suggests the roundness, okay? Okay, let's see, how does that look? Okay, yeah, okay, and I'm gonna just go a little bit darker in one section and cross on the other. Okay, so that's how I would think about first the gesture of the tree is curving, right? But to make that curve, it becomes the arm of a ballerina with strength and muscle holding each section, okay? Often getting just a little bit of a line back here can be really helpful, just to show perspective. Okay, maybe even, we're coming up here in some kind of a mountain range or something. You notice also in these lines behind, I'm not connecting the line all the way to the foreground element, because a broken line will suggest it is being overlapped by a continuous line. So this line does not go all the way up to the tree. Okay, now it's no longer the dead of winter. Hopefully we're past. I mean, I'm looking out my office window at still the fallen branches of a huge tree that fell across the street from me, and I was watching the whole thing fall and only covered up half of our drive, but we may still have some more trees. So I want to talk about the branches going into the foliage. Okay, let's say this is an older branch and it doesn't have foliage. I'm not going to do foliage out here on this edge, but over here, I think what I'll do is I'm going to suggest some shapes of foliage so that I'm not getting myself into a corner where I have no room for foliage. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm sketching out, okay, I'd like to have some foliage here, maybe a little bit here. And maybe this is actually, it's very loose. I could do this in vine charcoal and then erase it if I wanted to, but I'm just doing it with a little red Conti. Okay, I want to see if you can see those lines. Yeah, sir, you can see them. It's a little bit heavy going down here, but I won't make that quite so low. Okay, I'm using a kneaded eraser that you can, it's a good one for drawing and could be also used for pastel. Okay, so I can use, I can use points like, okay, I'd like to have this particular branch coming in this direction. And now that we know how to make those curved branches, I can just set it, okay, this is kind of a counter curve, and maybe I'll even have this other branch kind of swinging over in here with some foliage behind.
So by doing these dot to dot suggestions,
Yeah,
you're then
what I did was, and I'm going to pull the camera up just slightly so you can see the
well, I'm
top.
just thinking, is that how you get your better angles instead of like a continual line to make it look more organic, like a tree grows?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm often doing when I'm drawing in pastel and I'm on location is, let's see if this is, I think this is vine. Yeah, I might be very fast. I'm going to draw down here. Can you see that? No, you can't. You have to see it up here. Okay, I might be drawing around, just gesturing. I might be going really fast. And then I might even, because I'm feeling what I draw.
Okay.
And then I start to fill it out, because with pastel, I can go over most of it. And I work from messy to neat. I don't work tight. But since I'm doing a demo for you, I want you to understand what I'm, my steps. So yes, if you say, well, I want this picture to have the foliage in there, then I better figure out, in a sense, what is the edge of the canopy if I want it to fit in my composition. So you're out there and you want the tree to fit in your composition. You've got some other things, other elements, and you can go ahead and lightly design where you think the canopy is going to be. And then later, you can tighten it up. Now, I want to say at this point that my canopy is inside the shape of my paper. There are many occasions when it's much better to have the canopy go right off the top of the edge of the paper. And I think I'll get back to this, but let's see if you can see this. Okay, this is a black and white drawing from Claude Lorraine, from the 16th century French, who is considered the grandfather of landscape painting. If you have not explored Claude Lorraine, do explore Claude Lorraine's drawings. It will give you a lot of strength in your work. Okay, but you see that the tree becomes like a curtain, a darkened curtain for the scene. And the foreground is also part of that. We'll get back to that idea later. Okay, so what I want to talk about is how branches, rather than just being your light to dark, as a unit can be dark against light or light against dark. So let's say we have this bit of foliage over here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make it a little clearer so you can see it. And we have two branches that are, this one, maybe I'll have this, no, this is kind of like a big branch that then cuts off. Okay, now if I have that value the same for both foliage and branches, it's going to get a little confusing. So I think what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to make this edge of the branch, another branch, come over to here, instead of it being foliage. And then I'm going to have foliage going behind. Okay, all right, so we have a light section on this branch here. I am going to take the strokes for this foliage and make it darker behind. And I'm going to take the branch that kind of meanders over to here. Dark. And then right where the branch is dark and cuts into the foliage, I am going to have a little bit of some light sections. So you can play, I'm going to use a little bit of white here. You can play dark against light and light against dark. I'll demonstrate that in a couple more branches, okay?
Okay.
And a couple more elements of foliage. Let's cut this in. Okay, as we're talking about foliage, the other thing we want to do is, let's see if I can get a better white that really cleans this up. That's a little bit better. You don't want to have any lips that's just continuous. You want to get away from the initial ball tree that we all knew how to draw when we were little. Okay.
Gotcha.
So now this is a little hard to see. So what I might do is I might come back and I might, again, I'm thinking that contrapposto. And I don't have to, again, have a heavy line all the way around. But where one branch meets another branch, this is often an area of reinforcement, a collar, you might call it. So if we have a branch coming in here, I'm going to emphasize that it's got to get some support.
Are you talking about the wrinkles?
Well, right around the base of a branch that comes out from a trunk, there is some kind of thickening. So let's say I might even, just put, I'm going to exaggerate it so you can see it. I might put some kind of a support there, like a Band-Aid or a, so if this branch is in front, okay, we decided it's in front and this canopy is behind foliage. Let's make this branch over here behind. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a little concept that's, some people find it's a little confusing, but if I want this branch to go back, the branches are going horizontally to the left, but what if I want it not to just go horizontally left? I actually want it to go back. Since the branches really fill 360 degrees, right?
Right.
Then I'll show you up here. Let's see where you can see it. You can see it right.
You can see it up on your right under the sun.
You can see right down in here easily. Yeah. Okay, so if I do a series of lines like this, would you say that this line is closer to us or farther away?
Further away.
Yeah, it's further away. So let's say I did a series of well, actually, what you have to do is one has to go behind the other. What I'm trying to communicate is that, and I don't think the demo is that good, is that you can actually show the direction of a branch, whether it's coming towards you or away from you, by the direction of your curves around it. So let's say we've got this branch over here. And we want this branch from here to here to go back. I'm going to put a couple of curves going this way so that in a sense it's going back. And then I'm going to put a couple of curves going this way to suggest that it's coming forward. Okay, can you see that there's a little bit of movement in space from those?
Yes, yes.
So you can play with that idea. And I got to admit, I said, you should practice that. Can you can define this in a clear way? I'll let you folks work it out. Okay, so because branches don't just go out horizontally, they go diagonally, they go front to back, they go straight up. So when you're working on your trunk to branches, you want to decide how the space is being filled. What amazes me about trees is that they seem to know where to grow. I mean, these are big, heavy branches, and they grow in such a way that they beautifully balance other branches. It's they're not all piled up in one corner and they're just stuck. They fill a space that's so incredibly beautiful. I just am always amazed. Okay, now let's say out here, this little branch goes to, I'm going to make it a little darker. It breaks, and it goes to a little bit of some foliage. Okay, that can work. And I'm going to put another little twig going out here with another little bit of foliage. Well, how do we make the foliage look interesting? Ideally, we go back to shadows on the side away from the sun. This one, let's just say this is all in shadow because maybe it's underneath this one. It's coming from behind, maybe. And then you want to get away from the complete elliptical contour. So you go in, you break it up, and you add occasionally like just a little minuscule bit of the foliage out, because no foliage, unless you've got the gardener out there, just stays in one elliptical glob, you might say. So what about the canopy? The canopy and the cast shadow, you can actually go ahead and even get a little bit more dark near the middle, and it will look like the branch is going in. And if you want to, if you have this shaded, then you can come in with a lighter tone and make that little bit of branch that goes in front of the darkened foliage, make it light. Can you see that what I'm doing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's say behind this part of the foliage, we just see the air. We're going to keep it dark. But as soon as that other little branch comes into this area, we can make it lighter, and it'll be light against dark and dark against light. Okay.
Keeps pulling your eye around.
Right. And I can make a little bit more light foliage, like right under there. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a playful thing. So we know these are cylinders going out here. And when we can, like the light would be hitting this side, but this side will be in shadow, turning away from the sun. This will be in shadow, turning away from the sun. And this will be in shadow. And maybe we'll have just a little bit of shadow down here. And we can come back and we can add a little bit of light. Oh, that's not the one that really gives me the highlight. Okay. We can add a little bit of light on the top. Okay, so that branch will start to curve in and out. Dark against light, light against dark.
You know, in Monterey, we have the cypress that get wind blown and flattened, and that's kind of how that little branch kind of starting to look like that one.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
all have so much trouble painting.
And I have to say that, if I just draw a generic tree, because I grew up in a canyon filled with California live oaks, my trees look kind of like California live oaks or maybe cypress. Just a little side funny story. I was in Minnesota for a couple of years, and a friend asked me to draw their wedding invitation, the lake in Minnesota with some trees around it. So I went ahead and I drew the lake, and I went home and I drew some trees. And then after, she said, "So what kind of trees were those that you were drawing?" And I said, "Oh, just generic trees." And I looked at the wedding invitation. I was drawing California oaks, right? And of course, there aren't trees like this in Minnesota. So I kind of like, I didn't even realize that my generic tree was a California oak, but I learned that in that occasion that
Whoops.
you get me demoing on a oak tree.
We're going to talk about different kinds of trees. Okay, so let's just try this last section, and I want to do something with this foliage up here. What I want to do is I want to create what are called sky holes, because there's a few trees where there are no sky holes in New Zealand, and literally the birds have to be extremely careful or they die trying to get into the tree. So I want some sky holes with some branches going through. I'm going to put some shadow under this part of this foliage, and then I'm going to put some shadow under this part of this foliage. Okay. So, and then we're going to try to connect this up to this branch. Okay. Now, what are the things that we're looking for? One is if with a foliage goes behind the branch, like right in here, what am I going to do? I'm going to leave that last part of the branch light. But if the foliage is kind of right at the edge here, it'll be dark. Okay. So I might put a little bit of foliage coming behind these little branches, and I might come in and get a little bit of light right on this particular part. Okay. And then this is going to go dark into the foliage. Okay, so you can see how this is a sky hole, is simply a hole in the tree that
Shining through.
the birds can fly through. Now, you can talk about the canopy and the outside, and you don't want it just a circle. But one thing I've noticed is that, let's say the canopy has a sky hole here and it's kind of got a corner coming up here, that your eye will work really beautifully if you have an opening on the outside that's headed towards the other edge of the sky hole. Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so that kind of, your eye is like, oh yeah, like you're doing clouds. One cloud is kind of talking to another. So I highly recommend that when you go into the canopy, that you don't just, I'll just curve, and then put a pop. Try to be intentional about where you, let's say there's a sky hole here. So as I come around here, I'm going to leave an indentation in here, and I'm going to make this bit of canopy behind this bit of canopy. I'm going to make that canopy piece in front of the other canopy. Okay, so you start to get a little bit of volume, and then you go back and say, okay, my sun's up here. Okay, let's see if I can get, thinking about a sphere, I'm going to shade the lower left side. And when you go to defining the canopy edge with the leaves, typically you don't need to do a whole bunch underneath. but you can get some really great details. You think obscurity in the shadows and detail in the light. So I
Okay.
might leave the center of that light, but I might have an interesting contour line coming around. But I'm not going to go in and like put a whole bunch of details down here. It's not necessary. So detail where the light meets the shadow and some detail. And remember, we talked about get a little extra growth, okay, out there. So you can do that. You can always add a couple more branches as you see fit to make it more interesting.
Much more volume and than the lollipop trees.
Try that once again.
Much more volume than the lollipop trees.
Yeah, but I'm looking at my screen and I'm seeing that it's very symmetrically balanced. So
I'm going to do this. I'm going to, and looking at things backwards, I could look at it from here, but looking at things backwards is really important. So I see it backwards on the screen and I need to get more opposition, okay? Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit of, maybe I'll take a branch going out over here, a couple of twigs, and then some foliage on here. Can you give me a time check?
4:42.
Wow. Okay, so there's a couple more things about the foliage that I think are really important. And I'm going to go to a different piece of paper. If anybody is finding this is helpful, you can do Shift Command 4, and that becomes a screenshot. And this image will be top on your desktop. So does anybody need me to help you get a picture, or should we just move on?
Yeah, move it back. It's off center of your camera.
Okay, let me get. Okay. Should be turned down just slightly, but I'm going to have trouble. Oh, no, I can lift it up just. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. All right. Wow, this is way too round. I mean, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to. No, I think I'll just leave it. It's a demo. It's not like whatever. But if I thought this shape out, I just kept going. It's a little. It's not equally balanced, or this should go out a little bit farther. Just to have, some variety. Okay.
Okay.
All right, now, so everybody's had a great screenshot if they wanted it. I'm going to go on to another topic related to the tree. It's off. Okay, so I was walking
You have
a
to
little earlier around the neighborhood, and I wanted to get a couple of samples of some different foliage. And now this is not absolutely sure which oak leaf this is, but here's an oak branch that I picked. And we're going to look at one oak branch. This might be a white oak. One leaf. Okay. Now it looks kind of smaller near the stem. It has a little bit of what's called a crenulated margin. That means it kind of weaves in and out. And it has also a lobed quality. I am going to take a second and simply draw this leaf. Maybe I'll draw it sideways too. a little smaller. Maybe up here. Okay. Now what I want to introduce to you is that the large, can you see that? It's not great light, darn it. I guess it's not dark enough. It's a little hard for you to see, right?
No, we can see it fine.
Oh, you can. Okay, good. Look, when I look back on my screen, it looked awfully dim. The large, the whole canopy imitates the small. And what does that mean? That means that the shape of this leaf is going to have a similarity to the actual canopy of the tree.
Oh,
So what do we think about that? Okay, let's turn this into a trunk.
is that true on all trees? All different types of trees?
Yeah, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Okay, now, some trees are a little easier to follow this on, but this looks like it could be a white oak by the way the leaves are. But within this shape, I'm also going to go ahead and have this is going to have another branch that curves out here. This is definitely an oak tree, and a couple of branches that come out here. And I could go in and I'm going to keep my light to the right. Oh, that's the one that doesn't seem, okay, let's get the other side of it. Still not doing what I want it to do in terms of the white. Okay. A canopy, something that I wanted to tell you was that canopy is like an umbrella. If it will cast a shadow across the top of the trunk, and then you might have the rest of the shadow going down one side. So you want whatever the color is of the canopy, and there's going to be a cast shadow under the canopy as the branches go in. Okay, now how does this relate? Let's talk. There's some, I didn't find this particular kind of oak leaf, but as you can see down here. Okay, good. But let's say we have an oak leaf that is kind of crenulated, and it's kind of like more of a circle. This one's a little more elliptical and a little skinnier near the bottom. Okay, so this is a Quercus agrifolia. It's found all over the hills. Okay, I'm going to do some California hills here. And I'm going to imagine my leaf shape. On those hills. And I can still, they might be quite dark actually, and I might have just some bit of trunks going in, but you can see that, hey, yeah, that could be a California hill. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I'm really just describing the leaf. Now, it's not going to be one leaf. You're going to have maybe a little section in there that's another leaf, but if you keep this concept in your mind, it will, and then you might have a little bit of some shadow coming under the tree. You can do some California hills by going and picking the leaf of the tree, studying the leaf, and then going on. Now, where else can this happen? Okay, I saw eucalyptus in the distance, but I could not get any eucalyptus. So we think there's plenty of different kinds of eucalyptus, but I'm gonna just say, well, let's say we drew a eucalyptus, a generic eucalyptus leaf. Okay, this is,
You agree with me, a eucalyptus leaf? I mean,
No, no.
maybe it's a very, I have something here that looked like some kind of an olive relative, but it's really skinny.
so if I do, we know with eucalyptus trees that there's quite a bit of verticality of the trunks and the branches. It's like they keep going up. I mean, some bend, right? But there's a lot of up movement among the branches. Okay, so we got some branches, these are usually light, and we take our brush or pastel and we start doing the movement of the leaves. To kind of like counter movement to the branches, right?
So a eucalyptus you do in a longer shape and an oak in the rounder shapes.
Yeah, yeah. Now this particular oak is narrow at the bottom, then it gets wider, and I think it relates to the white oak. And this kind of oak is Quercus agrifolius, and it's the California live oak, which I'm familiar with. I just wasn't sure what kind of oak that was. But if you think that your stroke based on the leaf can help, it can. And if you do the canopy or a group of eucalyptus, actually there will be a group of eucalyptus together will have kind of a downward movement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it makes sense before you, hey, I'm going to put a tree in, you know, scratchy scratch, brush. Take a minute to tune into the tree and to go up and get to know the tree and look at it and just sit for a minute and draw a leaf. What is the gesture of the leaf? And that can lead you to a situation. I was working on a 52 by 18-foot mural in 2004 of the Chumash Indians in Santa Paula, inland from Ventura. And I wanted this big sycamore tree going up 18 feet. Well, you know, I'm on scaffolding and I have a couple leaves and I mixed up like 5 colors and I'm up on, you know, the second floor and I'm painting these leaves and I'm going down here and painting these leaves. And I finished the tree, you know, in several, I think 3 sessions or something. And then I saw birds trying to fly into the tree. And I thought, whoa, this is really bizarre. I'm taking it as a compliment, but the birds must pay attention to the shape. I don't think it's the color of my paint that's getting them to go in. And they would go up in front of the mural and they would flutter in front of it. And then they'd go back and they'd flutter in front of it. And I was like,
Best compliment ever.
yeah, right. The birds liked it, but this is all beat up, but this is a maple, but this big fat sycamore leaves in Central California. So you know, I kept that sense of 5 and I worked 5 big sections in the tree. And then I would do 5 sections. And if you understand the design and you see that the large imitates the small, that it's scientifically, it's geometry and whatnot, it can really help your drawings of trees. Okay. All right. Time check.
5 minutes to 5.
Okay. I think it will be time for me to go ahead and show you some pictures of just,
Excellent.
okay.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to go to this. Okay. share, okay. Okay, now is that coming up as a full, your screen sharing? Oh, I'm looking for,
There it is.
what are you seeing?
I'm seeing your sidebar and a small image of your tree that's not the full screen.
Got it. Okay, so let me, I had put it on just a sec. Okay, let me move this. I just need to move this thing down. Move this over. And let's do view full screen. Okay, that's a little better. Some of these seem to be bigger and some smaller, but here's a cypress down at the base of Ocean and Carmel. And I found that if I went back and I added even touches of orange after I'd finished it and re-emphasized the light side, it was more exciting. On the foliage, I kept it very simple. And you know, we think, okay, foliage got to be green and trunks got to be brown. No, they don't have to be. You can have a unity of color throughout both the trunks and the foliage. And I would recommend that you look for unity in your trees. Okay, now it should shift. Man, I had it all set up to shift. Okay, come on. How come it's not shifting? Come on, it should go. There we go. Okay, so here's another California oak. And one thing that you can do are holes in trunks. They can be so great, you know, really. And then what I love is sometimes dead branches that show movement, like they're dancing. But when I was working on this, I definitely was looking for angles of the branches. Okay.
And
Yeah.
your trees in the back, when you're doing that background, you kept them more uniform in color, not as
Yeah. And I have to say, in terms of looking at those trees in the background, these two trees, I don't think they're that great. I mean, I think I could have simplified those a little bit. I think the strength of this is the foreground tree. This is done on a color paper that is this deep tan. It's called the cart sandpaper. And so that brown is coming through. If you're painting, having a tone of the paper that's tan or red is wonderful for trees. Okay, let's see what happens if I go up. Okay, we go that. Let's go this way then. Okay, so the first two were pastels. This is a 2 by 4 foot image of San Lorenzo giant. The San Lorenzo, giant, which is in the middle of Henry Kell. And
geez, is it still there?
the tree is still there. When you do the walk around, it's kind of a, you know, people stand only as high, maybe as like up to this first burl.
I just meant after the fire.
Oh yeah, it's all there. Henry Kell was saved. Teddy Roosevelt was here. There's a historic picture of him standing in 1905 right in front. There was a picket fence and all these trees. Actually, a lot of them had business cards on them because it was a commercial park owned by someone. Fortunately, it's open to the public now. Okay. I like these two pine trees, partly because they're talking to each other. Their roots are connected, and the volunteer path that people have created to go down to New Brighton Beach, it's almost built onto the roots that go across. And there's always communication from one tree to another, if, you know, particularly if they're similar.
Yeah. So you said that was a pine?
I haven't gone up close to it for a while. I think it's,
Well, I'm just looking at the leaves,
maybe it's a spruce. I'm not quite sure.
but they have the needles kind of.
Yeah, it has needles,
And
right?
so in your
It's a conifer.
description of the leaves, when you come to something that has needles, is it more how do the branches and the leaves relate to that?
Well, the pine needles are typically in a clump. It's not like I'm going to draw one needle and it's long and skinny. it's a group of needles, and they kind of form a circular shape. And I'm looking at these. I picked an actual piece of this oak tree, and I'm looking at it for the individual oak leaf. And
Right.
but it really grows up in similar shape to this individual leaf. Yeah.
Does always the pine type trees, their limbs go downwards and then up? You know,
Well, I certainly have noticed that with redwood trees.
yeah,
But
and
I'm not going to make a generality. We have to get in there from observation.
okay,
I find this is one of the amazing eucalyptus that's at the UC Arboretum, and it's obviously peeling. And I found that by going in and making a very dark background, it became more of a soloist on a stage. So
Right.
it was originally lighter gray in the background, and it was okay as a picture, but it wasn't grabbing you. And so I went back in and I brought out more of a warm color after I'd finished it to emphasize the movement. Okay, this is a pastel based on standing in Nicene marks, which is close to me, and it's based on a piece of red Lacarte sandpaper. So it's kind of a earth red, but that color comes underneath the foliage. You can see the reds coming through, and red and green are complementary colors, and so the green helps a lot in this picture.
it's very,
Oh wait, I'll go back to this. One of the neat things about these redwoods is those final little branches that curve out. And when you draw them, again, I'm trying to make those curves with a few straights, and then I'm coming in with a highlight, a light. And because there was light hitting them, there would be some section of the curve that would be dark, but I don't know if you can see my mouse, but like up in here, it'd be a little light on the top. And then, so, okay, so is the screen of everybody in front of this picture? I'll put it to the side. Okay. Can you see the picture?
yes.
Okay. Because your faces just keep coming up in front of the picture, but
Oh, no, we see just your painting. We don't see our,
okay. So I hadn't been outside painting because I'd injured my ankle last January. I mean, a year ago, and bad sprain. It took me a few months to just get it so I could stand for any length of time. I was painting sitting down. Finally got out springtime, and I went out to join some friends in the Santa Cruz oil painters. And I typically work in pastel. And there was this apple tree that didn't have all of its blooms open, but it had most of them. And then the green leaves were starting to come. And I really enjoyed just trying to get the angles of those branches, using your like contour lines, get some of the flow of the whites. And I used a darker gray so that the white would show against that. Let's see. Now I know there's some more. Come on, what's up? Here, let's click on this. Maybe that's what I have to do. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this one was done close by, and I worked from a photograph. And what I did is in this case, it's a fairly big picture. I think, did I scale it up, or I might have just quickly projected the shapes. And then instead of just painting them all one tone, I went in and I painted some purple and some reds and some oranges, and it was kind of expressionistic. And then I started to build up those singular trunks and try to get the movement of the foliage going around up on top, the lightness of the foliage. I did a series called Pathways Through Our Parks, that is on my website. It was 50 images from around 27 state parks in Santa Cruz County that I did at the Natural History Museum about 4 years ago. And this was one of the images in that catalog. Okay, now this is an example. This is about 6 feet tall, and this is the first stage of a piece of the 5 large murals that I did for the Wolfson Nature Center in Pfeiffer Big Sur. So I'm basing this on one of the eucalyptus that were along the Big Sur River. Now you can see that the light's coming from the left. I have 2 acorn woodpeckers that the naturalist had asked me to put in. And to make the thing look round, I'm not just using a core dark on the right, but I'm using the shape of the bark. So I would actually draw circles, ellipses around the trunk, and then I would fit the bark into that so that it really looked round. Okay. So
That's
this
a
is
good idea.
so this is the first stage. It was kind of a yellow underpainting. Here it is finished. This is still a piece of the mural, and the color's off. But that's okay. And then here is an example of the one corner of the room. This is 8 feet tall, where the river is then going up to the Big Sur Gorge up above. And the challenge was I painted the mural on canvas in my studio that wrapped just around to this box on the right over here. And then this all had to get painted on location because of the box. So I had this in my studio painting it. Then the naturalist and I went up here and I had to somehow connect this down. So it was a little bit of a Lego puzzle piece. But this wonderful tree has roots that just wrap right around these rocks at the edge of the Big Sur River. So if you get a chance, go down and it's not open this time of year, but in the summer, if you're in Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park, this is right over the metal bridge from the Big Sur Lodge. And I'm very proud of it because it has 5 huge murals that go through all the different animals and all the different environments of the Big Sur area.
What an accomplishment. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to stop my share because that is, and I'm going to go back to FaceTime. So I'm right here. So does anybody have any questions? We'll put that over there.
Does anybody on I don't know if anybody's on that does the outside painting. I know a lot of our group does plein air.
Mhm.
And when you're outside painting and you're seeing, the trees, and for me personally, it's these, cypress or is that what they are that are down by in Pacific Grove, and the Monterey cypress.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
And they get wind blown and they've got sky holes, but they've got all these branches and I think me personally paint too literally. When you're looking at something like that, how do you not get too involved with it at first to
Yeah, I was going to try to pull up a Monterey cypress that I did. Monterey cypress. Let's see if it comes up in my website. No, it's not. I'd have to. Well, I think what I remember going out, and I've been teaching some drawing at Monterey Peninsula College, and I afterwards went out. I was kind of warmed up, So I had a fairly big piece of paper, and I just said, okay, what's the gesture of this tree? And in Vine Charcoal, I just went ahead and I went through the big branches and the shape, and then a line for the ocean, and then there were some rocks leading up. And partly because I worked large and I worked for the gesture, then the skies and all that stuff came later. But I worked quickly and with bigger pieces of pastel try to get the gesture. That's what I did. So the sky holes are kind of like decoration on the cake.
Yeah, and when you said earlier, when I think it was the cypress, that you kept the tree and the trunk kind of the same, a lot of times they're backlit and you don't really see much color, and I, instead of trying to put all the color in it, to leave it maybe just the same or a more monotone, because the trunks are kind of almost a blue-gray looking in the light, and then they've got these kind of flattened bundles of leaves.
Yeah, so this one, I could have put a lot more green into the canopy, but I wanted to keep a unity, and I wanted to let it go off the top. And it didn't have this much light on it. But I'll be honest about this picture. I had it around for 2 open studios for 2 years, and it was painted in gray fog, and there wasn't a lot of light on the tree. And I had a figure leaning against the tree, and a couple people looked at it, but nobody was like excited. So what I do is sometimes back in the studio, I have paintings that I take out of the frame, and I said, okay, it doesn't have the punch that I really want. I am going to beef up the color in the water. I'm going to go ahead and beef up those light effects.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with going back and fixing it.
Right. And I used it as a Open Studios catalog image or card, and it immediately sold. Not because it was on the card, but because it had more drama. And I'm not saying that that you necessarily want to get rid of a foggy day. A foggy day can be incredibly beautiful, incredibly powerful, but I didn't have enough contrast. So I have gone back into paintings, and I've seen people looking at something and, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then they leave, and that went by for 2 years, and I said, okay, let's just see what happens. And I think about 6 of the paintings that sold last year were ones I'd taken out of the frame, and I've been looking at some ones I finished in frame, and I said, that one's going to go out of the frame. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to beef up the contrast, because I tend to be more neutral in my build up of value. I don't go for the darkest dark light immediately. And I think it's partly my coloring. I'm kind of like a neutral looking person. I don't have nice rich black hair and pale skin. And I've noticed among my students that students who have high contrast in their coloring, they get the contrast immediately. And other artists, and those who are maybe fair and kind of like, they're more delicate transitional shading, but not so much high contrast shading. So
interesting.
yeah,
I'm going to be looking at people's paintings.
see if of course, if somebody's hair turns gray, you don't know if they had dark hair before, but they could. Yeah.
I just wear brightly colored clothes, and so everything that I paint is brightly colored.
So are there any other questions of other people who might like to ask the question?
Let me take your picture off of the screen so I can see if anybody is in the chat.
I stopped my share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can everybody, if anybody wants to say something, you can either put it in the chat or unmute and ask Anne. Any problems you've had painting trees or successes?
I see a lot of people being muted, so
Yeah.
if you unmute yourself, I think you can.
If we have a bunch of shy people, they all let me talk. That's why they want me to do this, because I'm a blabbermouth.
Well, that's fine. I have no problem with that.
Well, I think that this was a lot of wonderful information. I can't wait to go out and try trees because I'm right across from Toro Park. And
Oh, great.
I went over there and painted some. Now I'm gonna go back and look at what I painted and going, ooh, I should have done that.
Well, that's great. I'll have to contact you. Hey, I'm going to be painting
Oh, totally do it. Do it. That'd be great.
a friend in, so it looks like, now people may have left, but that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 participants today. Am I correct?
There was 11.
Oh, okay.
that
So
were here.
there may have been a couple people who've signed off after the
Yeah.
demo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really great and I appreciate so much that you did this for us. And if you will send me your address
Okay.
and I can send you your check and because I did not